What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to my channel, Joy Speaks, a channel that I created to provide a voice for the recovery community. And when I say recovery community, I'm referring to people who are struggling with substance abuse, alcohol, mental health issues, and their loved ones. Because as we know, it's not just the addict or the alcoholic who's affected, but also the community that surrounds them. Before I get started, do me a favor. Hit like, hit share, and most importantly, hit subscribe. Hitting subscribe will cost you absolutely nothing. All that will happen is you will have access to my channel. And if you hit the notifications button, you'll be notified every time I put out some fresh content. Well, I have an update for you guys. I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. I relapsed on nicotine. Yeah. Unfortunately, life got tricky. If you've been keeping up with my channel, then you saw that at the top of the year, I had this whole situation where my bank account was hacked. And during that time of me waiting for, a resolution to the hacking of my account, I started vaping. And I want to say I'm still very, very sober of drugs and alcohol. That has not been affected at all. Purely by the grace of God, but I have relapsed on vaping. However, the silver lining is today I have 27 days free from any nicotine whatsoever. So I just want to tell you guys about what this process has been like for me. It's not something that I'm super proud of, but it is something that has impacted my life. And part of my channel is, just being transparent about what recovery looks like. And yes, recovery does, associate with drugs and alcohol, but for me, it also is part of my experience with using nicotine. I have had a fascination or a fixation with smoking for my entire life. I remember even as a kid, like rolling up grass from the backyard and using notebook paper just to roll it up and fake like I was smoking weed or smoking cigarettes. So, and I also grew up in a time, yes, through my childhood, smoking was considered negative, but it was also just very, very socially acceptable. Very much like alcohol. My grandparents smoked. My mom smoked. Not anywhere around the time that she was raising me, but as a kid. So smoking has been around my family. There's even a picture of my grandmother holding me as a very young child with a cigarette in my mouth. And yeah, hopefully I can just pop that picture up so you guys can see. But I didn't stand a chance to kind of sum it up. However, I in 2023 I was able to quit vaping for a full year, and I've shared very transparently about what that process was like. And I also was very honest, in my 1 year update of being free from nicotine. I was frank and I said, the thought of smoking does still sometimes feel attractive, and like I shared, having my bank account being hacked, it sent my mental health, down a spiral. And of course, I would love to have navigated that in the healthiest way possible, talking about my feelings, practicing more, transparency with my therapist. I have tools on how to navigate life without picking up a substance. But I will say that, although picking up nicotine was not something that, I'm proud of, I am very, very, very grateful that it was just nicotine that I picked up and not alcohol or harder substances, because it could have very much been the case. But yeah, this time quitting, it was so different. This process has been wildly different than the process that I experienced the last time I quit. The first time, I think I was relatively just lucky. I had a lot of willingness to be uncomfortable. You know, I had a lot of willingness to get through, you know, uncomfortable situations, you know, get through work without having to rely on nicotine. I just had this abundance of willingness. But this process was very different. You know, when I officially bought my vape, I was vaping in secret. And I wasn't vaping a lot. You know, I was really just vaping at the end of the night. You know, I was worried and stressed about, you know, how my money was going to be returned back to my account. I I I was in a lot of fear. I was in a lot of fear, and so I ended up getting the vape. And I remember very clearly, like, there was such a there was such a strong feeling of excitement, having that vape again. You know, there was no initial regret or shame, you know, on day one of vaping again. I remember just hitting it and feeling like, God, I miss this feeling, you know. But I will tell you that that experience of having a vape and enjoying it without any shame and without any guilt and without any discomfort was incredibly short-lived. Uh, so like I said, I started off vaping kind of in secret, and it was very minimal, you know, but it quickly progressed to, where's my vape when I wake up in the morning, you know, and hitting my vape, you know, right after I worked out, and hitting my vape after eating my first meal for the day, and then hitting my vape on the way to work, you know. And then I was fine with getting through the whole shift without grabbing a vape. And then in a matter of maybe less than a week, you know, I was stepping outside here and there to hit the vape. And so in a matter of maybe a week to 2 weeks, I was full blown vaping all day, every day. And that's when things started to get uncomfortable. Because then I started to realize, like, how dependent I was once again to this stupid battery, you know. And for a while, I tried to kind of just like wrap my mind around, well, maybe I'll just hold on to this habit, you know. Maybe, I mean, because honestly, yes, it's not healthy, but it could be a lot worse. But it that just didn't sit right with me. I did not like being bound to the vape again. I did not like how I was feeling like I was using the vape to escape life, you know. And that's how I use any and all substances, was either to escape or to enhance, you know. And I use the term enhance very lightly, because a lot of times it was just a facade or an illusion of an enhancement that wasn't really there. And so yeah, I just started to spiral out. I was vaping nonstop, and I remember telling myself, okay, I have a birthday coming up. Like, I will just vape until my birthday, you know. And then I was like, I was vaping so much that I thought to myself, like, do I really want to bring in, you know, another year of life attached to a vape, you know? And I just felt so embarrassed. You know, I felt confused, because I'm like, how did I work so hard, get to a full year of not vaping, and then, you know, in a matter of a couple weeks, just fall right back into how I was vaping before I quit the last time, you know? And there was something that happened that kind of shifted things for me. Um, so acknowledging that I was vaping nonstop, feeling shame, feeling frustration. Then I started to try to quit again, you know. And so that looked like me leaving my vape at home and trying to get through the day at work without vaping. Failed miserably. You know, vapes are easy to come by, and I was just asking my coworkers to hit their vapes, you know. And then I got to the point where I was like I'm just gonna what I knew from the last time that I quit was that if I don't have a vape, I can't vape, and so I would throw away my vape, and I would throw away my vape in the beginning of the day, like maybe in the morning or even at night. I would hit it a bunch of times, and then I would toss it, and then I'd wake up in the morning and be right at the vape shop buying another vape. I was just powerless. I was completely powerless. Like my mind would say, it's time to stop, it's time to quit, it's time to throw this thing away, but then my body would go on autopilot, and then I would be buying a vape again. And the wasting of the money was huge, because it's like, all right, if you're gonna spend $25, make it count. I there was twice, okay, and this is embarrassing, and I'm not proud to say this, but twice I bought a brand new vape, opened up the package, hit the vape, and put it in some water, killed the vape, threw the vape away after hitting it once, you know, completely unmanageable, completely insane. Twice I did that. Twice I bought a brand new vape just to hit it a couple times and then throw it away with the hope that I could quit. Failed miserably. But the turning point came when I ended up getting sick, and I got bronchitis. And I remember sitting at home, coughing my lungs out, and still fiending to hit the vape. Bronchitis is a respiratory infection. Hitting a vape or smoking, is abuse to your respiratory system. And so it dawned on me that even though my body was in pain, even though I was in a lot of discomfort, I still wanted to vape. That was a problem. That was a problem. That was a wake up call. And so once I started to really get like peak in my sickness, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna stop. Like this is ridiculous. The fact that I can hardly breathe and that I'm coughing my lungs out and I'm still wanting to vape, that's a huge fucking problem. And so I made another promise to myself, like maybe the 30th promise to myself, that I would quit because I was sick. And so I ended up starting to feel better and ended up starting my new addiction, which is hot yoga. And so once I started to get on the other side of my sickness, I started to go to hot yoga. And the yoga instructor, I don't know. I just love my relationship with God. I really, really do, because God puts people in my place and in my life at the like perfect time. And so it's my first time taking this hot yoga class, and the yoga instructor is like, if there's something that you are afraid of doing, this is the perfect place to walk through that fear. And it hit me like I am afraid of trying to quit nicotine again because I've been failing at it, you know. But she spoke to me, and so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna acknowledge the fact that I'm afraid that I won't be able to successfully quit again, but I do have enough willingness today to try. And so then I thought about, if I'm gonna take this hot yoga thing seriously, I'm going to want to keep my body in tip-top shape. And smoking and vaping is not going to help in becoming a better yogi, so I got through that class, and then she shared that it was her 43rd birthday. And this yoga instructor looked like she was 23, gorgeous woman. And I mean gorgeous in a sense of, yes, physically, aesthetically gorgeous, but she had this glow that was very, very attractive to me. And so, that just kind of reminded me that I can put forth a lot more effort into my well-being as opposed to, my unhealthy demise. And I am a huge advocate of fitness and wellness and self-care. Yes, it sounds a little crazy, like how is that possible when you've had this issue with vaping? But this is just my honest truth. And two things can be true at once. I love to, eat right. I love to be active. I love, new fitness adventures. But I also identify as an addict in recovery. And so I will inherently always have at least somewhat of a desire to self-medicate or to numb or to enhance or to escape. Um, and so I got through that first yoga class, and I started to feel strong again. And that willingness that I had to be uncomfortable throughout my first time quitting successfully, that willingness started to come back. And this wore me out. This really wore me out. And what I mean by that is the cravings this time were so intense, so insidious, so consistent. Um, and I watched a lot of videos that I had watched previous, the last time I quit successfully. I watched them all again, and I'm going to be honest. Most of the information out there suggests that like the first 2 to 3 days are the hardest days. And I guess in comparison to, you know, the first 3 days compared to the first month, yes and no. The physical withdrawals, right? The headaches are next level, like next level borderline migraine. The headaches are so intense the first couple days. The irritability is insane. You for me, I could not find happiness. I could not find laughter. I was on edge. I was miserable um, through the first couple days of that physical withdrawal from the nicotine. But what lasted very, very long this time was the cravings. The cravings were nonstop. Like every time I was eating, every time I was getting in the car, you know, craving 4 or 5 hours at a time through my shifts at work, hardcore cravings at night, right when I clocked out. Uh, and also like moments of pause, in between working out and having lunch, moments of pause, like, once I lay down in the bed and I'm about to go to sleep, like these moments where I have some idle time were moments when the cravings really sunk in. And and they lasted. But this experience, this go around with learning how to let go of nicotine, day 25 was pivotal. Day 25 stuck out so much through this process for me because it was day 25 that I realized I had gotten through a full 24 hours without any cravings. So what that means is that for this time, through this process of quitting nicotine, it took me 25 days to get to the point where I was not craving nicotine again. I think the first time I quit, that happened a lot sooner. Let me just say that. This time was miserable. This time it felt like it took forever. But I am so grateful that that day 25 was such a peaceful period through this process. Day 25, my hope was restored, because I was starting to feel like, damn, am I gonna just forever be hardcore fiending for nicotine? And I'm grateful for my God. I'm grateful because, like I said, when I first started vaping again this time, my willingness to be uncomfortable, my willingness to want to quit was gone. I was more so trying to wrap my mind around like, I'm gonna just be somebody that smokes or someone that vapes, you know? Um, but I'm grateful because my relationship with God today is like, God for me represents like this spiritual well, right? And and it's a well of abundance. So there are things that I will be lacking. There are things that will be spiritually depleted that I can, I can draw from through God. I can draw from this well of patience. I can draw from this well of willingness. I can draw from this well of grace, compassion. There were so many moments through this process of letting go of nicotine, where I had to just fully surrender and throw my hands up and say, God, I need you to help me through this, you know? And once again, I feel like for me, once that surrender happened, once I let go of trying to control the narrative and I let my God do it, I was taken care of. You know, and so today I don't have any more cravings. Thank you, God. I have no more cravings. And I'm going to be very, very, very careful moving forward around, you know, my spiritual arrogance, you know. And when I say spiritual arrogance, I mean like thinking that I can just start vaping again and then just quit whenever I want to. You know, it's not lost on me that me not having cravings today and me having some freedom from nicotine addiction today is not to be taken for granted. You know, it's something that a lot of people strive for and unfortunately can achieve successfully. Not only have I been able to do it once successfully, but God willing, this go around, you know, I can last longer than a year. I don't know. But what I do know is that if I don't start, I ain't got to worry about it. Right? If I don't buy one vape, I don't have to worry about quitting. If I don't ask one person to hit their vape, I don't have to worry about starting this cycle all over again, because this cycle was brutal and it seems to be progressive in nature. So the first go around was difficult, yes. Uncomfortable, yes. But it was somewhat manageable. This time it wore me out. I'm talking about shame, anger, cravings, you know, feeling hopeless, you know, feeling like, damn, am I ever gonna smile again? Am I gonna find my happy again? And once again, I'm just grateful for the relationship I have with God, because today I have that. So that's my process. That's been, you know, where I'm at, you know, as far as the last month navigating quitting nicotine again. It has been a struggle, but I am finally over the hump. I'm finally in a space where I'm not craving anymore. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention, I definitely ate a lot more candy over the last month. Yes, I know I've talked many, many times about, you know, sugar and candy and eating right. But once again, right, I have to be able to give myself some grace. And if that means eating some more candy, gaining a pound or two, you know, so that I can achieve freedom from nicotine, once again, for me, it's worth it. For me, it's worth it because I do have the discipline and the practice to stop eating the candy and, you know, hit the gym and, you know, practice more of this hot yoga, which I'm absolutely in love with right now, to just bring my body back into shape and maybe even develop, you know, into the best physique I've ever had. Who knows? Who knows? But if you're struggling with nicotine addiction, if you're struggling with quitting vaping, listen, I have quit a multitude of substances, and I will tell you guys this: nicotine is the hardest. Nicotine is the hardest because it's so socially acceptable, and also because we don't see in real time the damage it does to our body. You know, we can relatively vape for years and years and years without any substantial consequences. But what I do know is once the consequences are there, 9 times out of 10, they are not reversible. So I want to live a long, lasting, healthy life. For me, obviously that means nicotine free. I'm not going to sit here and say I'll never smoke again. I hope that I don't. I hope that I don't find myself in a situation where I'm like, maybe I can do this, because it's just been proven to be a struggle and almost impossible. And I don't know if I have another, you know, comeback in me. So I'm going to do my best to keep my focus on my mental health, my physical health. And, you know, the next time life shows up like it did when my money got, you know, sucked out of my account, I know better than to pick up nicotine, because once the money was restored, I was still stuck with this disgusting, damn near debilitating vaping habit. So yes, quitting vaping is possible. You know, it is not easy at all. The first 3 days are, you know, the physical withdrawals, and then you got a good 2 to 3 weeks of hardcore craving every single day. But now, I get through a full day at a time without any cravings at all. So it's possible. If I can do it, you guys can do it. I hope that I said something in this video that you can learn from. If you're struggling, I get it. Have some hope and have a lot of patience because it takes that. Anyway, I love you guys and I'll see you on the next one.